And today we have Bjoern Lomborg. Bjoern is the founder of the Copenhagen Consensus, also a doctor, a professor, and author of two books, The Skeptical Environmentalist and Cool It. What do you make of what's happening here?
Well, Ryan, fundamentally what they're doing is they're repeating the same failed strategy for the last 18 years. I mean, they're promising to cut carbon, but we did that already. We did that in 1992 in Rio, where we promised to cut carbon and didn't do any such thing. And then in Kyoto in 1997, we promised to cut even more and didn't do that. So my problem with this conference is really we're promising again. We'll make a grand document, but we'll not actually live up to it.
Let me be the devil's advocate. I mean, that sounds rather defeatist. What are you suggesting? Everybody just goes home and continues to pollute?
No, I'm very happy that they're here. But what we should be doing is do something that's both politically more feasible, but also economically much smarter. We asked some of the world's top climate economists, including 3 Nobel laureates in the Copenhagen Consensus, to say where are the smartest ways to deal with climate. They told us if you spend it like they're thinking of doing here, namely just cutting carbon emissions, even if you do it very smartly, for every dollar you spend, you only avoid about 2 cents of climate damage. If you instead spend it much smarter on research and development into clean energy, for every dollar you spend, you end up doing about $11 of good.
Sure, but the whole idea of the emissions cuts is to put a price on carbon at the end of the day, to encourage investment in greener technologies as an alternative to paying the price of a product that has a carbon cost to it.
Yes, and
to encourage green. I mean, it's this, you're talking about the same thing.
Well, there's definitely a sense in putting a low carbon tax, which is the equivalent, what's the damage of a ton of carbon emitted right now. But we should not expect that will actually cut back very much. Because basically, we've already seen that with the oil crisis a couple of years ago. We saw the Saudis essentially putting a carbon tax that was much, much higher than what everybody else would be willing to do. And it still only reduced our consumption slightly. So the point is, it can fund research and development, but ultimately we will never succeed to make fossil fuels so expensive nobody wants to use them. What we should do is to make green energy so cheap everybody, including the Chinese and the Indians, wants to use it.
Let's assume you're right. They're having that conversation over there, the delegates behind us, when they come in after breakfast, right? We're having this conversation over here. You're not part of that chat. So what does it matter what you say?
Well, I'm an intellectual. I try to get intellectual ideas out into the public, and I think there's a lot of people that realize we're about to make the third time failure. After Rio and Kyoto, Copenhagen will just be another failure. And instead of us being back here in 10 years and having a conversation about why did Copenhagen fail, it matters to say there are smarter ways, both ways that we can get the Chinese and Indians on board, say we all spend 0.2% of GDP on research and development into green energy technology.
That'd be a lot cheaper than the 1% they're talking about just in terms of aid, right? From 2020, everybody here is talking about spending 1% of GDP, i.e. $400 billion a year. Rich countries giving climate aid to poor countries to deal with the bad climate and to build low carbon future. So this is cheaper.
It's much cheaper, it has much greater chance of success, and it will actually ultimately fix climate change, because once you get solar panels that are cheaper than fossil fuels, of course everybody's going to switch over, not because they're forced to, but because it's cheaper.
All right, Bjoern Lomborg, very interesting perspective.